This is part 1 of lesson 4, which corresponds to chapter 4, Network Security Threats and Issues. The key concepts are what you need to protect and from whom, the risk assessment for network infrastructure, wired and wireless network infrastructure risks, threats and vulnerabilities, common network hacking tools, applications, exploits and attacks, and social engineering practices and their impact on network security efforts. The learning objective is to recognize the impact that malicious exploits and attacks have on network security. There are a lot of different hacker motivations. Some do it for the thrill of it. Others do it as a hobby. Some do it for the challenge, try and break into a system that has, or a network that has not yet been broken into. Others do it for the status, to be able to point out to others that they've done something that the rest of the hacker community has not done. And of course, the final and most obvious motivation, money. Favorite hacker targets include easy assets, those that pay off quickly, that give monetary gain or control of networks, or unique targets that are challenging and are hard to break into. Previously in this course and in the fundamentals of information system security, we discussed the 7 domains of the typical IT infrastructure: the user domain, workstation domain, LAN, LAN to WAN, remote access, WAN, and system application domain. We're going to discuss the various threats, vulnerabilities, and risks to each. The user domain includes any individual associated with the organization, including users, employees, managers, contractors, or consultants, even if they don't have logins. Probably the number one threat to the user domain is social engineering. Users being attacked by hackers or attackers using psychological techniques such as persuasion or impersonation in order to gain access to facilities or computing resources. Hand in hand with that goes phishing. Users tricked into giving away information such as login passwords by way of fraudulent email. A variant of that, of course, is spear phishing, where the phishing emails are directed at an exact person, or whether they are directed to seem to come from a specific person. And Trojan horses and spyware. Users are tricked into installing malware on their systems. Vulnerabilities include center around weak procedures and weak physical security. An example is a social engineer calls up IT pretending to be a user and gets a password reset, thereby gaining access to a user's account. Or a social engineer impersonates maintenance staff or a repair person and installs keylogging devices on computers. Risks include unauthorized access to facilities, compromised user accounts, unauthorized access to data. The risk of damage from user-based attacks is very high. For example, a successful social engineering attack in which an account is compromised allows the attacker to bypass security controls. The workstation domain. Workstations include standalone systems and home computers. The threats to this domain includes malware such as viruses, worms, trojans, spyware. It's a significant threat in this domain. Port scanning can be used to find unsecured ports on a workstation, which gives the attacker insight into what type of attack might be successful. Malicious web sites use attack techniques such as cross-site scripting to gain access to secure web transactions. Vulnerabilities include non-patched operating systems applications, weak or no passwords, insecure use of administrative accounts, insufficient or no malware protection. Often, workstations are not secured as well as servers, and home computers are not secured as well as business computers. Common vulnerabilities include operating systems may not be patched at all or deficient in patches. Operating systems may be patched, but users and IT staff may forget to patch applications or may choose not to because it's time-consuming and perceived as low risk. At home or in organizations where password policies are not centrally administered, systems may have weak passwords or even no passwords. Unless specifically prohibited by security policy, the average user is likely to be using an account with administrative privileges, which means that any exploit taking place under the user's account is doing so with elevated privileges. Unless enterprise-level managed anti-malware software is used, there is a chance that malware definitions are not up to date, that scans are not conducted frequently, or that certain functionality has been disabled. For systems that are not connected to the network 24/7, definitions may be significantly out of date. Workstations may not be protected by firewalls, hardware or software. Home computers may be attached directly to the internet by way of a cable modem. The risks include compromised systems can be used to attack others, because you're made into a zombie and a botnet. Data exposure, loss, or change. The loss of availability. The risk depends on the environment. A compromised home computer may not affect the home user at all. However, while that user sleeps, his computer may be conducting denial of service attacks on corporate networks because, again, that computer has been made into a zombie as part of a botnet. Alternately, that same home user could have his bank account login credentials compromised and find all his money has been transferred to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. A compromised corporate workstation can lead to loss of confidential or proprietary data such as customer financial information, trade secrets, or payroll information. The LAN domain hosts on private LANs, local area networks. The specific threat depends upon the organization and its assets. Generally speaking, threats are electronic here, natural or human. Electronic threats include malware, malicious code, botnets, and software bugs. Physical threats include hardware failure, natural disasters, and accidental or purposeful damage to the equipment. Human threats include disgruntled employees, poorly trained employees, and hackers. Vulnerabilities, like threats, vulnerabilities are specific to the organization and its resources. For example, different operating systems have different vulnerabilities. Generally, vulnerabilities are caused by weak security procedures, weak security controls, and weak perimeter controls. When it goes back to the disgruntled employees, even though it's presumed that the Sony hack was done by North Korea, there were many Sony security employees let off, or IT employees let go of last year. Any one of them that's disgruntled could have possibly have had enough access or privilege to have conducted an insider attack or an attack after the fact, after they've been fired, to have leaked the Sony documents. When it comes to risks, the compromise of one host may result in the compromise of the enterprise. Data exposure, loss, or change, disruption of the business. The risk depends on the environment, the organization's business, the type of assets it has. Basic risks such as data loss, change, or theft of disruption and disruption of business apply to all organizations. Additionally, it should be stressed that compromise of one host on a network may result in compromise of the enterprise. The LAN-to-WAN domain. Routers, firewalls, other devices at the LAN-to-WAN connection point. The threats include port scanning. Sequential port scans can be conducted from the public internet side, revealing details of configuration that may allow an attacker to better profile additional services. Denial of services or distributed denial of service. Because it is a gateway, it is a constrained point with limited bandwidth, and the act of filtering increases latency per connection. It is easily saturated. Directed attack. The WAN connection is exposed to the public internet, and so it is directly accessible. Vulnerabilities include weak perimeter security, remote access to routers and gateways, weak or default firewall passwords, incorrect configuration, misconfiguration due to complexities in rule sets. If careful planning is not performed in advance, misconfigurations can result. The risks include if an attacker gains control of the firewall, they can easily disrupt gateway functions and create network instability. Unfiltered malicious traffic, loss of availability, disruption of business. An attacker may actually gain control of the firewall. The remote access domain. Organization resources by way of remote access through dial-up, wireless, or standard broadband internet connection. The threats include malware on the remote client, war driving or net stumbling, rogue hotspots. If a VPN is not used, remote clients using rogue hotspots risk having their session captured. Rogue wireless access points and ad hoc wireless within the organization can provide an attack vector into the network. The vulnerabilities include unencrypted wireless access points, local cache of data on the remote client, and weak security controls on the remote client. The risks include any service designed to give someone remote access can be exploited remotely. Compromise of a remote system could result in an organizational compromise bypassing network controls. Many remote access systems create encrypted sessions that do not allow direct inspection of packet contents. For example, Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. Remote connectivity happens in the open. Broadcast traffic is omnidirectional and can be intercepted anonymously. The wide area network domain, infrastructure elements such as routers, switches, and firewalls. Threats include eavesdropping. Unencrypted traffic can be intercepted. Availability. The organization does not control the wide area network. Anonymity. Attackers are anonymous when coming in from the WAN because they can spoof their origins or distribute their attacks, such as botnets. Interception proxy attacks. Because data moves through a public network, interception along the route of transit allows numerous attacks, such as man-in-the-middle. Vulnerabilities. Dependence on the domain name system. DNS poisoning or DNS spoofing can compromise traffic intended for hosts and services located in the local area network. Lack of endpoint validation. It is possible to construct a TCP/IP packet spoofing its origin, thus concealing backtracking efforts. The risks include a successful attack on the root DNS servers could cripple name resolution internet-wide. Clear text traffic can be intercepted, rerouted, or changed. Compromise of wide area network infrastructure elements is undetectable by the organization. And WAN routing involves wide geographic areas and may pass traffic through unknown geopolitical areas. Without knowing where it's going, natural disasters, power failures, and other wide area affecting issues could compromise availability. By the way, the successful attack on the root DNS server is what caused the attack on the New York Times a couple of years ago. The system application domain includes servers, applications, databases, and data. The threats include cross-site scripting, buffer overflows, SQL injection, and denial of service and distributed denial of service. Databases are attractive targets, of course, because they contain a large amount of information. The vulnerabilities include the use of default passwords, weak security controls, non-patched operating systems and applications, cached credentials, insecure coding practices. The risks include use of unencrypted protocols can allow compromise of data in transit. Lack of code review can introduce instability. Data exposure, change, or loss. Denial of service attacks against one service can also prevent function of other services on the same host. Port scanning. When mentioning vulnerability scanning, stress the importance of conducting periodic vulnerability scans. Port scanning includes the mechanics of it. TCP or UDP packets are sent to ports on a system. Scanning is performed on a single IP address or IP address range. Open ports can verify particular services that are on the system or the presence of a system itself, or some other system on the network. Indicators of open ports. TCP, full TCP three-way handshake is established. UDP, the lack of response may indicate open ports, since closed ports usually generate errors. Noticeable and detectable. Uses. Useful to both hackers and security professionals. Hackers can determine the existence of a host, determine the existence of service. Security professionals determine the existence of rogue hosts and the existence of rogue servers, and can be part of a vulnerability scan. So it can be used, port scanning can be used by both hackers and professionals, and for different purposes. Well, that concludes part 1, and part 2 will continue on with the rest of chapter 4.